Yep.
There we go. All right. Cloud Foundation Technical Oversight Committee for 28th of March 2023. Agenda for today, review some actions from last week. We'll hear from the CF on K8s Working Group. We'll talk about the CDN. I'm even going to try and pronounce that name because I do not know how to pronounce it. Email aliases for working group approvers and admins. Look at some PRs. Any other business. As always, if there's anything you want on the agenda, go ahead and add it. If there's any PRs you know of that I don't know of, go ahead and add them. Otherwise, quickly on to reviewing actions from last week. Chris, you said you were going to reach out to working group leads about Docker Hub changes.
Yeah, I've mostly done that. I think I still need to ping one or two, and I have not reached out to Eric about finding a time to purge users, but that's not super high priority. But I'll knock all that out this week.
Also, Docker Hub said that they're not going to make the change, right?
Right. So it's not a super high priority at this, but I'm still, I mean, I've already pinged people. So at this point, I'm still encouraging people to move things to the Cloud Foundry, Docker Hub org, just so things are kind of neat and we know where they are.
Makes sense. All right. On to CF on K8s Working Group. Floor's yours.
Okay. As usual. Share screen. Boom. Let's see if I can present this. Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
As usual, I am Giuseppe. I am one of the leads for the CF on K8s Working Group. So I'm here to present what we've been doing in the last couple of months since the last update we did, I think, in January. I think last time I presented, I think we had just released 0.5, so a couple of releases have happened in the meantime. One was release 0.6, and with that one, we introduced a way to basically replace the ingress controller that we usually ship Korifi with anyone that users might want to use. The contract is a CRD that we own that is called CF root. So basically, it is now possible to turn off the default implementation of that controller and provide your own implementation, which might use any ingress that you like. And it should work. I think someone has managed to make something work with Istio, I believe. Technically, it should be possible to do this with any ingress out there. Another thing we did was we decided to pretty much merge all our Docker images into just two. So basically, we used to have one Docker image for our API shim, which is the thing that exposes the traditional Cloud Foundry API. And then we had a whole bunch of containers with different controllers running on them. We decided to merge them all into one single image. Some of those controllers are optional because we have all these pluggable interfaces. So for example, I just mentioned the networking controller can be turned off, or some others can be turned off. Previously, you would just not deploy those controllers. Now you can just turn them off via some config option, and we just won't start them. But this makes Korifi a lot easier to manage because you just have two things to care about. And then after that, we released 0.7 literally yesterday. And that one comes with quite a few things. So first of all, we finished the work on labels and annotations. We had been spending like some time adding labels and annotations to resources in a bit of a random way. And we decided to finally finish it off and add labels and annotations to all the resources we have implemented. So you should expect to be able to set metadata on anything that Korifi exposes. Then a big feature that we added is cleaning up of packages and droplets which is something that we did not have and traditional CF has had forever. So the Korifi installation would grow and grow and grow and grow, because as you pushed apps, you would upload new packages, you would make new builds, push new container images, but nothing would ever delete them. And it would be impossible to manually do that without risking, maybe breaking running apps. There was no straightforward way of figuring out which things could be deleted or not. So we introduced automatic deletion of those resources with our configurable retention, which is defaulted to 5, exactly like traditional CF. The differences with traditional CF are that I think traditional CF marks resources as expired and then deletes them overnight, while we delete them on the spot. And the other difference is that CF has the blob store on, and it has full control over it. So it's pretty much guaranteed that CF will be able to delete the bits that needs to be deleted. We deal with container registries, and we discovered that support for delete operations on container registries is very weird and different, because like the spec is very fuzzy about how deletions should be done. So some container registries will prevent you from deleting in some circumstances. Some will do it when you don't expect it, stuff like that. We tried to come up with a system that basically does its best to delete the images without deleting, let's say, too eagerly. But if it fails, it will just carry on. Still, unless you are on Docker Hub, which just straight up prevents deletions, you should see your images be cleaned up. What else? Service accounts. So you can now use service accounts as Korifi users, which could be useful for automation. So previously, I think people wanted to automate CF operations. I think CF has its own concept of like service accounts or something similar, where like you can log in with a user and secret. But Kubernetes has service accounts that you can authenticate in a different way without having to go through the same authentication flow as users, which are very useful for things that are not attended by humans. And now you can just use the service accounts as Korifi users. There's a specific syntax that now I don't remember now. You have to prefix your username with a specific prefix, and Korifi will notice that it's a service account and treat it as such. The VCAP application Enva, I think we were not exposing it at all to applications until now. Now we do, and on top of like the regular values that you would expect, we've added the possibility of adding custom extra values via config. And this was useful because, for example, there are some situations where, like, for example, you might want to use UA. So we had someone on the team experiment with integrating Korifi with a UA-backed Kubernetes. So use UA as the OIDC provider for Kubernetes, and in that case, you can get Korifi to expose UA in its like root endpoint, and if you do that, then the CLI will automatically talk to UA, and basically you get a much nicer logging experience. It will feel like using traditional CF because the CI authenticates directly to UA, and then the tokens it sends get accepted by Kubernetes because your OIA is the IDC provider for Kubernetes. In order for all of this to work nicely, CF needs to basically advertise what's its UA. But we didn't, since this is something that almost never happens, we didn't want to add that field to VCAP application like always, but you can add it yourself in the config. And I guess you can get creative, and if there is any value you want your apps to get via VCAP application, you can add it in the config. Unset-org-role, unset-space-role are now working, so we implemented those missing endpoints. Multiple app manifests. So previously we had pretty much artificial limitation on manifests, and we would only process like the first app in the list. Now we don't anymore. nothing really, that didn't require many changes really, just a for loop, but it's nice to have. And then 404 errors. So we used to return 404 errors that were not valid CF 404s. So they were not in the right JSON format, and that will make the CLI upset. So now we return 404s that look like CF's 404 and look like every other CF error. And that means the CLI can parse it and present it to the user nicely. So yeah, lots of stuff, very rich release. And it came out yesterday, so if you want to give it a try, it's at the usual place. So next is like plans maybe for next release. This is what I think we've been thinking of as the most urgent things that we want to look at. One is support for more Cloud Foundry role types. So at the moment, if you use Korifi, you can be admin and you can be a space developer. And those two, I think, are pretty well fleshed out in terms of like permissions. But if you try to be like an org manager, for example, permissions for org manager are completely nonsense, right? They don't make any sense. I think we've been adding some permissions in order to make tests pass or something, but we never actually fleshed them out properly. We never supported any role outside of space developer. So we would like to go through all the role types that CF offers and see if we can reproduce them as closely as possible in terms of Kubernetes RBAC. And people can already bind to those roles. They're already there. It's just the permissions they will get will not correspond to the ones that people expect. So one piece of work is going through those, making sure that they all make more or less sense. It might not be always possible to reproduce the same granularity that CF has, but I think we can get pretty close. Build caching, this is an interesting one. So Korifi builds apps via build packs using a component called K-pack, which is basically a Kubernetes native implementation of the pack tool. So it's capable of orchestrating a build pack lifecycle and build an app using build packs. And in K-pack, there is a concept of an image, and an image is a thing that you want to build associated with some source code. But the image is supposed to be a long-lived object that gets rebuilt over and over again by updating the sources. And the image has some caching capabilities. So it keeps a cache across those builds, so that if you rebuild almost the same source more than once, then it will just pick up that cache and be fast. But the way we've architected Korifi at the moment creates a new one of those image objects for every push, which means we don't take advantage of this cache, even though we could. So we want to re-architect our builder so that it has one long-lived K-pack image object per app, which means every push will result, like your second, third, fourth push should be a lot quicker because of this caching. And cloud native build packs are probably a lot better at caching than traditional build packs, which means once we do this, Korifi pushes will be significantly quicker than their equivalent in traditional CF because of the caching. So that's something that we hope to pick up soon. Environment variable groups is just another bunch of endpoints that we could implement, and they might be useful for sharing environment across apps. Better delay jobs. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the CF CLI has the CF API has an endpoint for observing jobs. So when the CF API does anything like asynchronously, for example, deleting an org, something that takes a long time and is done in the background, what it does is it spins up a job, what it calls a job, and then it redirects you to this /job/GUID URL, and you can poll that URL to see what's the state of the job. At the moment, what we do instead is we have a shim that always says, yeah, it's completed, fine, it's all good. And then we do stuff in the background, but you don't really have any way to monitor it via the CF API. So one thing we could do is actually make those URLs work so that you can actually monitor the state of the current operation. We might have to be creative to do that, because we don't really have any system to queue and execute jobs in the background like Kapi has, Kapi has some sort of work queue, which we don't. So maybe we might want to either get creative with the IDs of the jobs in order to identify what's going on or stuff like that. But we'd still like to have that endpoint not be just an empty shim that always returns a success, because this way you can, for example, wait for your org deletion to finish and know when it's done, instead of just having no clue of whether it succeeded or not and how long it's taking. And then, yeah, Docker support is something that we've been wanting to do for a while. I think I wrote a proposal about it months ago, then we've been postponing it, and it's something that we might want to pick up at some point, because we feel like the architecture completely fits. And of course, we are on Kubernetes, so there shouldn't be any issue in running like regular OCI images. So it should be a relatively easy thing to add. So that's it. Been talking a lot and very fast, but if you have any questions or doubts, or you want me to repeat anything, I'm here.
The experiment with using UAA for as an ID provider, was that just was that a spike for a thing you want to do with Korifi, or was it just sort of an idle, oh, I wonder if we can?
So it was our ISAP colleagues who I think are trying to use Korifi internally, and they have a UAA lying around, and they were like, oh, can we use this? And it was interesting because, you know, UA basically what they're doing is they're using UA. They're both talking to UA directly and using UA as the authentication backend for Kubernetes. And we didn't really know if it would work to get a token by talking to UA directly and then passing that token to Kubernetes and see if Kubernetes accepted it. But it turns out it works. It's the same tokens. You get you get them via the, let's call it proprietary UA API, or getting them via the OIDC flow. It's the same tokens. They're interchangeable apparently. So given the CLI is a specialized client, is a specialized UA client, we can leverage that and let the CLI get the token in the way it knows, which is very straightforward with username and password. And then the token it will get will be accepted by any Kubernetes that uses UAA as their IDC backend. So yeah, it turns out it works. It can be done by anyone. It's because in the end, the only change that we needed in Korifi was this thing of adding the UA to the VCAP application, right? And I think also to the I think you can change. You can I don't remember now, but like you should be able to change it in the root response as well. And that way, like when you point your CF at your CF CLI at Korifi, it will see UA and it will use that when you try to log in.
Yeah, that
so I'm not actually sure if you can do that now, because now that I think about it, the CF CLI is looking at this is CF on K8s flag that we return. And at the moment, they might be hard-coded. I think what they did is they manually modified the Korifi sources to return false to pretend it's not Kubernetes. So we might have to actually make this in a bit of a cleaner way. But it does work. It does work on paper. It might be in practice. It might not work. But yeah, it's something that they've seen working with very minimal changes to Korifi. So it's something that can definitely be done.
That is a very good thing to hear, because that has been like one of my personal, like, how would you even do that kind of questions with Korifi?
Yeah, luckily, not just UA is OIDC compliant. It's one of the few open source OIDC implementations out there. Actually, like there's not many. If you want to have your own standalone OIDC provider, there's not many. Like I think there's one that only acts as an adapter to third parties. I can't remember the name. It's written in Go, and what it does is like, okay, I will plug it into, I don't know, the GitHub auth or the Google auth or whatever, and allow you to log in. Dex, yeah. But like it doesn't have its own user base. It always needs to delegate. But UA is standalone, and it's again one of them. There might be something else from Red Hat maybe, but there's not many. So, and I remember looking into this when we were trying to figure out what was the best way to do authentication in Korifi, and not many providers will allow you to override the authentication provider to use your own IDC thing. But I think Amazon is one of the few ones that will allow you, unless of course you manage the cluster yourself, and then it's just a matter of passing a bunch of flags when you start up the API server.
To know. Any more? Nope. Okay. Oh, thank you very much for your time. Well, firstly, is there anything you need from us?
No, I think we're good. There've been some efforts already in terms of like promotion. I think there is a new tutorials website that is soon to come out, and there's been work for KubeCon, etc. So that's really good to see. Also, you see we've got hoodies and stuff. So I think we're pretty happy with the promotional work that has been done so far, and so hopefully we'll see more and more adoption.
Yeah, good to hear. All right then. Let's move on to the problems with the CDN we've been seeing. Chris, what's your understanding of this so far?
Well, I don't have much of an understanding of it. You pinged me overnight, and I see there's various chat right now in the CLI channel about other people who have things that are breaking, and I'm not quite sure how those things all relate. But yeah, something's breaking. Is this in packages.cloudfoundry.org?
From what I have seen, yes, this only affects packages, but that's not to say it isn't wider.
Right.
It seems like the CDN is blocking requests from anything with a user agent of wget or curl, which is very odd behavior. Wouldn't expect that. There is a workaround, change your user agent. That's the workaround that I'm advising within government at the moment.
Okay.
So we have a workaround, but I think there's been some other problems with the CDN for a little while now. Like my team has been experiencing a lot of timeouts and stuff with it, or just straight up connection resets and stuff that look like rate limiting. And we've kind of not got anywhere with it over sort of past couple of months, really. We've been encouraged to raise a PR to add retries to the build packs, which we're doing, which we have done now. I'm talking to Ryan Moran about getting that reviewed and whatnot. I'm just wondering, like, how do we progress this? Does anybody know the team that looks after this?
I don't. So I mean, we don't need to necessarily hash all this out on this call, but yeah, I'm not quite sure. But we could. I don't know. Eric, you have any insight?
I mean, we could start with the CLI team. I think they're still mostly West Coast US, so they should be coming online pretty soon. We can see what context they have and if they have any insight into resolving this.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, let's see. Hopefully they'll chime in on Slack fairly soon, and then we can, I'll be around if I'm needed all day today to help with this. But okay. Yeah. Let's try and sort this out on Slack today. But I don't have any insights into what's going on right now.
Okay. Then let us move on to email aliases. So somebody raised this the other day.
Sorry, I was muted. Can some context be added to the document about like the thread and stuff where this is being discussed?
Yeah, I'll do that after this.
Okay, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, let me.
I think there's just a few messages in the CLI channel right now.
So I'll just add a quick. So there was a message about potentially using email aliases. Like, to me, this seemed like kind of a no-brainer. I guess it was just a question of like, how feasible is this to do?
Pretty straightforward. I think I can set that up I can use cloudfoundry.org Gmail accounts and set up. Yeah, I can set up as Google groups or as email aliases. I don't know if this is something we want to do. Like, I would think we probably do this as requested by working groups. I mean, as opposed to me reaching out and trying to set this up for each working group, whether or not they're going to use it or not. So, yeah, folks, I forget exactly who chimed in. This was on Slack last week. I think someone asked. So yeah, just if people reach out to me, I can set up email aliases for working groups. And I can
one source could be the application runtime deployments working group for new bots. The background is that some bots were really hidden inside VMware, and we couldn't get hold of the credentials, and then it started from there.
Okay.
So it was maybe Jochen Eretz, and then I will tell him if he wants to have such an alias, and we can, get in contact with you.
Just reach out to me. I can set that up. We can have there can be an admin,
perfect
approvers, or they can just be one, whatever you'd like. I can get that set up.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Should have added that earlier. Right then, PRs. The only one I could see was 560. Is that the only one?
I think so. That's the only one that stood out to me.
Yeah, I've been seeing you adding the TOC labels things. Thank you for that. It saves me some time. Yeah, we'll just get that approved and merged then. It says I've already got words. Since it's already got everyone's approvals on it, that's what I was trying to say and failing completely. A or B then? Stephan, you wanted to talk about some stuff?
Yep, I added 2 topics. The first is the branch protection. We have activated it now in the application runtimes deployment working group, and well, there's a little bit of first feedback. So applying of the branch protection worked out well, but then trouble started, and there were 2 basic issues on the road. The first were the bot that we do not get hold on the passwords of the bot users. That's where this conversation within new email addresses for those bot users came from. We created a new bot that starts to work now. And the second point is that we had to find out that many of the pipelines use actually GitHub deploy keys instead of users to access the repositories to write commits into it. That is not so much in source code repositories, but basically in state of the bubble environments for the test environments and some versions, etc., where GitHub is more or less used like a database, basically. And that one is actually ugly. So we initially started to exclude a few repos from branch protection just to get the release pipeline working again. But then at CF deployment, we actually stopped that because here you have real sources and we don't want to deactivate. And we are now on the way to get rid of all those deploy keys and replace that with this one new RRD bot. I mean, bots and deploy keys, they both have pros and cons, but with the automation in place, I would say bot is the right way to go because that's well managed, that's automated, and these deploy keys, they start to lurk around. And say if we want to use them, we would have to exclude admin users from the branch protection basically completely. And that's, we thought then that the bot user is a more proper way. So there are a few follow-ups. if another working group wants to start with branch protection, maybe you wait 1 more week, then we should have in RD all the pipelines green, 1 new release cut, and then we know that it's working, and maybe have found 1 or 2 more obstacles that nobody needs to run into. So overall, it seems to work. Okay, any questions on branch protection? Oh. Okay, then I come to another more delicate topic. It looks like on CF Linux FS4, there seems to be an attempt to remove Python and Ruby from the stack itself to reduce the attack surface, etc. The intentions are all good. However, it came in a little bit late to the party. Let's say it like this. It is a rather big incompatible change, which is okay. It's a new stack, and it was done for this new stack release. Build packs need to be updated, but what is also we see now that a few of our customers have already apps migrated, and there's also a certain, let's say, expectation that the migration from CF Linux FS3 to 4 is as smooth as possible. If the dependency is just the build pack, this will be solved by an updated build pack version. That's fine, but as you can imagine, with several 100,000 applications, there are all type of usages, and of course, a few of the applications will also rely on the fact that you have a Python or Ruby for templating or whatever on the stack. Now the question is, what do we do with that? Is it already too late to revoke that, or I just want to raise the awareness at least, and to think twice before that one gets actually really released, because it has consequences. And it comes now very late. I mean, the CF Linux FS3 has just 4 weeks left in its official lifetime with security updates, unless you have this one. If it would have been done in the very beginning, let's say in September last year, with the first CF Linux FS4 stack release from the beginning, then the story would be slightly different, and it could have been announced, and please be aware when you migrate, you have to, but now it will hit. I mean, let's say the customer opinion about a new stack is already not that welcoming, and now it comes another kick. So that's why I thought it is worth to mention it, and at least to consider. Will also be some feedback on this issue from, let's say, a few other SAP colleagues. The issue was raised by Jochen just because the pipelines were read and cuts were not working anymore, because so it means there are incompatible changes.
I believe the urgency came from like a desire to like have this in like one of the internal or VMware releases, right? And there's an LTS release upcoming, so they want this breaking change in there. But I understand that from a community point of view, this is like a bit of a odd timing, and like we have like internally more focus on like CV triaging and getting those numbers down. So this felt like a thing that, yeah, if you have to do, and that pressure started to come in like, you know, more recently. So this felt like a thing that from that point of view was the right thing to do at this time, because it's not something easily you can like, you already see the impact of this change now, right? And it hasn't been like, not everybody has moved yet, right? So this would not be something we can do at a even later point, right? We cannot do this gradually. So if we keep the dependency, it will stay there till the end, till we get a new
state. If Linux FS5, you could remove it.
Yeah, then you could remove it. So I think that's the discussion. Like, are we gonna keep it in 4? I mean, another thing you could like think about is maybe not rely on the Ruby from the from Canonical, but instead get the Ruby from the build pack, the Ruby build pack, and ship that with the, so get a more recent Ruby. One that we do update. I mean, I'm not involved at all with build packs, but that could be something that could be a compromise, so that we would keep a Ruby, but we keep it more up to date, and we will be responsible for maintaining it, but we are already doing that in the Ruby build pack anyway, right? So.
Of course, an application could, at least there's a theoretic possibility that the application breaks just by applying the CF update. The new state comes in. If there's a runtime dependency to Ruby or Python in this app, I mean, that's not a good idea and not good practice, for sure not. But rest assured, there will be a certain amount of apps that exactly use that, and they then simply get kicked off, and that, yeah, something where compatibility is maybe then also a important thing to do.
I think it's maybe worth asking if there's a reasonable procedure where if an app itself is relying on Ruby or Python for templating or some other behavior because it's been in the stack, if there would be a fairly routine procedure for them to add that in via, say, specifying an additional build pack, like the Ruby or Python one that would supply it. I mean, you know, I that does seem like a substantial concern, Stephan, that apps might be relying on the stack provided one for arbitrary behavior. So I don't know if the build pack teams had been considering that as they removed them from the base image and then were resupplying them in the build packs that relied on them. I think that's worth raising.
I mean, the build packs will supply the necessary runtimes which are needed, for instance, in staging, etc. But that doesn't help if an application has a runtime. So, for instance, my personal test application, I mean, that's very arbitrary. I'm usually using the binary build pack and then run Python Java server because it's a one-liner to push an app that won't work anymore. Such types of dependencies, I mean, if that is used in a real application, the application will directly break when we apply the CF update, and that's the worst thing actually that can happen. The customer has changed nothing, application goes down, that's it. So here I guess there will be some more feedback, but I would really consider to maybe postpone this removal, and then maybe after CF Linux FS4 has been rolled out and we have collected some feedback, we might in the TOC also have a, let's say, sort of retro session about the stack thing and also come up with some ideas how to do that less painless in the future. For instance, delivering new stacks every 2 years so that customers have more time. There are other ideas, whatever, but at the moment, customers who have to migrate have a hard time.
Mm-hmm. So how big is the impact? Like, how many apps have already like migrated to CF Linux FS4?
Okay, so some it's not the majority,
or percentage,
but,
maybe, like, if you don't want to say an absolute number.
It's a 5-digit number we have already running on CF Linux FS4, but it's less than 1%. With these two numbers, you can always. So we are talking about 160K applications overall, and 10+K already migrated because we treated them and we treat them pretty hard. So there will also be a forced migration that we will run on all applications without a lot of mercy to get the numbers over, to get them over to CF Linux FS4. Because then really beginning of May, there's no security support and we have to do certain duties to keep them secure. I cannot do everything, but we will eventually remove CF Linux FS3. And that is not next year. Will be, well, there are no dates yet defined, but we are not sooner than later, let's say it like this. And of course, applications that are still using at that point in time, they will also drop. But here you can bring in security, CVEs, etc. as an argument for an self-baked incompatibility. It's more difficult. That's all.
And do you know of those apps that have have migrated, how many would be like affected by
Exactly.
the Ruby?
This
I mean-
I don't have a number here. I have only heard that there were some apps found that have that, but I would assume these are really a few. These are not the majority of apps. I mean, it's a very questionable use case. Here, I admit that completely. And also my test app, that's just pure laziness. I will find another. That's not the problem, but just to show what kind of applications I mean.
Yeah.
The ERB templating is something that is that has been seen in some applications. And then relying on Ruby, so just to get some manifest files or etc. before the application starts. It can be solved, that's no question, but it's external customers applications. Difficult. Especially difficult if we crash them during an update. I mean, if it just happens at the next staging, one could say, okay, bad luck, but application downtime is something that is difficult.
From my perspective, I could live with it both ways personally. If we had to remove this and go and reintroduce it in a CF Linux FS5 in a year, 2 years, fine. Stack changes are infrequent enough that it's not so bad. They're not fun, but they're achievable, at least at PAS scale. But equally, if we, for the sake of expediency and making sure CF Linux FS4 was generally available before Bionic dies, I could live with communicating that out to tenants. We're already planning to use this to find zombies anyway, and like sort of deliberately kill applications who haven't been responding to us via email when they've been given more than enough time. So come, I think our plan is August, September to switch over to CF Linux FS4 as default, because we need about 3 or 4 month window. See, I could live with it both ways. I think I'd probably prefer to just do the messaging than have to do 2 stack upgrades personally, because reaching out across government is difficult because nobody wants to talk to you, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, like with the increased focus on like security scanning and CVEs, right? Like that will you will probably, if we leave Ruby there, you probably have to go through exception processes every time for that stack. So reducing those, like especially Python, there were all sorts of things like criticals in there that aren't getting patched. That is a bit problematic, right? That was one of the main drivers. Just a few criticals in there that are always showing up for the stack. That just it's not a good sign.
That's definitely also a valid argument. Yeah, it's just a bit too late this time.
Sure, I know.
But if there is an easy way to keep at least to provide the build pack version of the Ruby, so to not introduce new CVs, well, you have to scan the build pack anyway. This is something we can look also into, as suggested.
Yeah, I mean, like worst case, you could look at creating a watch release that just copies in some files in the rootfs. I don't know if that works, but I don't know if that, like, that's basically layering on top of the rootfs. I don't know. Wouldn't be simple. But yeah, we'll see where the discussion goes. I think we don't have a.
It's the working group's decision to make, right?
Yeah, in the end, yes.
Yeah. All right. Because I'll add the stuff, the CDN after this. Any other business? No. All right.
The one regarding the CF day, Chris, do you know what the capacity there is of the rooms?
Oh, and the capacity, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I think it's around 70 or something. Yeah, should be fine. I believe. We are going to be tomorrow. We're planning on putting out a blog post and hitting Slack channels, CF dev, CFF members, the mailing list and stuff like that, and spreading the word. So the website's active now. We haven't publicly announced it. We'll plan on doing that tomorrow. Yeah, it's coming together. And of course, we'll be at KubeCon in just a few weeks now. So for folks that are going to be there, you can find us at the Cloud Foundry booth. But yeah, we'll announce that tomorrow, and then I mean the first step, the CFP will be open immediately, and the first step will sort of be putting together the program committee. So we'll reach out to folks about that too. But yeah, expect announcements probably tomorrow, if not by Thursday.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Anything else anybody else wants to cover? No? All right. Well, then let's all go have a part of a Tuesday, whichever part of the Tuesday that's going to be for you. Right? Oh, sorry. I can't make it next week, so I guess organize in Slack whoever wants to take over for next week. Right.
Okay. See you.
Catch you all next week.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.